The wrecking ball swung through the air like a pendulum of destruction. I watched in horror as it crashed through the kitchen window where my great-grandmother had baked bread every Sunday for 60 years. The sound of splintering wood mixed with my own screaming as 4 generations of my family history crumbled into dust and debris. Corinne Matthews stood beside her white Mercedes, champagne glass raised high, filming my devastation on her phone. Her perfectly manicured smile gleamed as bright as her diamond earrings. She had won, or so she thought. What Corinne did not know was that buried in the family documents I had frantically rescued from the demolition was a single piece of paper that would change everything. A document from 1893 that would give me the power to destroy her empire just as completely as she had destroyed mine. That piece of paper would let me shut off the water to her entire 1,500 sheep ranch and the luxury subdivision that had stolen my land. Forever. My name is Jake Morrison, and I am a third-generation sheep rancher. Every morning at sunrise, I would walk out of the farmhouse that my great-grandfather built with his own hands in 1923 and listen to the gentle bleating of 1,500 sheep across 800 acres of pristine Montana grassland. The mountain air was so clean it hurt your lungs in the best possible way. My boots would crunch through morning frost as I checked the fencing, counted heads, and made sure the water troughs were full from the natural spring that had fed our livestock since my great-great-grandfather first claimed this land in 1893. This ranch was not just my home. It was my bloodline, my heritage. My great-great-grandfather had driven sheep across 3 states to find this perfect valley where mountain water ran clear and sweet, where grass grew thick and green, and where a man could build something lasting for his children and their children. The old farmhouse still had the original stone foundation and hand-carved oak beams. The kitchen table where I ate breakfast every morning was the same table where my grandfather had signed his marriage certificate in 1952. The front porch swing where I watched sunsets had been built by my father when I was 7 years old. For 38 years, this ranch had been my entire world. I knew every fence post, every pasture, every sheep by sight. The rhythm of ranch life flowed through my veins like the mountain spring flowed through our irrigation channels. Feed at dawn, check the herds, mend what was broken, and sleep sound knowing that tomorrow would bring the same peaceful routine. But paradise has a way of attracting serpents. Over the past decade, the city had been creeping closer to our valley. First came the highway expansion, then the strip malls and gas stations. Finally, the luxury housing developments started sprouting like weeds across what used to be wild grassland and family farms. The worst one was Willowbrook Estates, a pretentious subdivision of oversized houses built right up against our eastern fence line. Cookie-cutter mansions with perfect lawns and 3-car garages, filled with people who had moved to Montana for the country lifestyle, but complained about everything that made country life authentic. They complained about the smell of sheep manure. They complained about the sound of bleating at dawn. They complained about our old pickup truck driving past their fancy mailboxes. They complained about everything except the mountain views and clean air that our ranch had preserved for over a century. The queen bee of these complaints was Corinne Matthews, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. She was a perfectly put-together woman in her early 50s with salon-styled blonde hair, designer clothes, and a smile that could cut glass. She drove a white Mercedes SUV and carried herself like she owned the entire valley instead of just a 5,000-square-foot house on a half-acre lot. I first met Corinne on a crisp October morning when she appeared at our front gate with a clipboard and that razor-sharp smile. She wore high heels on a working ranch, which told me everything I needed to know about her common sense. "Mr. Morrison," she said, extending a manicured hand that had never done a day of honest work. "I am Corinne Matthews from the Willowbrook HOA. We need to discuss some concerns about your property." I should have known right then that my peaceful ranch life was about to become a war zone. Corinne Matthews returned 3 days later with reinforcements. This time she brought 4 other HOA board members, all dressed like they were attending a business meeting instead of visiting a working sheep ranch. They stood in a perfect line beside their luxury vehicles, while Corinne held her clipboard like a weapon. "Mr. Morrison," Corinne began, her voice dripping with fake politeness, "the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association has identified several issues with your property that are negatively impacting our community standards and property values." I crossed my arms and waited. After 38 years of ranch life, I had learned that sometimes the best response is silence. Corinne flipped through pages on her clipboard with theatrical precision. "First, your sheep operation creates unsightly conditions and offensive odors that violate our community aesthetic standards. Second, your farmhouse is in a state of disrepair that brings down neighborhood property values. Third, your fencing is outdated and does not meet current community guidelines." The audacity took my breath away. I stared at this woman who had lived in our valley for less than 5 years, telling me that my family ranch violated standards that did not exist when my great-great-grandfather first broke ground on this land. "Ma'am," I said slowly, fighting to keep my voice level, "my family has been ranching this land since 1893. This ranch predates your subdivision by over 80 years. We have been here since before your great-grandparents were born." Corinne's smile never wavered. "That may be true, Mr. Morrison, but times change. Communities evolve. What was acceptable in the past may not meet current standards for a modern neighborhood." She flipped to another page. "We are prepared to offer you a reasonable timeline to make the necessary improvements. You have 60 days to remove all livestock from the property, demolish the existing farmhouse, and install modern privacy fencing that meets HOA specifications." My blood pressure spiked so fast I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. "You want me to remove my sheep and tear down my family home?" "We want you to be a good neighbor," Corinne replied sweetly. "Surely you can understand that a working ranch does not fit the character of an upscale residential community." One of the other board members, a thin man in an expensive suit, stepped forward. "Mr. Morrison, we are not unreasonable people. We recognize this transition may require some sacrifice on your part. The HOA is prepared to offer a modest compensation package to help offset your relocation costs." "Relocation costs?" I repeated. "This is my home. My family has lived here for 4 generations." Corinne's mask of politeness began to slip. "Mr. Morrison, we are trying to work with you here. But make no mistake, the Willowbrook HOA has legal authority to enforce community standards. We have consulted with our attorneys, and we are prepared to take whatever action is necessary to protect our property values." "Your attorneys?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lady, you do not have any legal authority over my land. This ranch was here before your HOA existed, before your subdivision existed, before you existed in this valley." Corinne's smile disappeared completely. Her blue eyes turned cold as winter ice. "Mr. Morrison, I strongly suggest you reconsider your position. The HOA has significant resources and political connections in this county. We will not allow one stubborn rancher to destroy the investment that our homeowners have made in this community." She turned on her high heels and marched back to her Mercedes. The other board members followed like obedient puppies. Before getting in her car, Karen rolled down her window and delivered her parting shot. "You have 60 days, Mr. Morrison. After that, we will be forced to explore other options." The white Mercedes disappeared down our gravel driveway in a cloud of dust and implied threats. I stood there in the afternoon sun, surrounded by the peaceful bleating of my sheep, trying to process what had just happened. That evening, I called my family attorney, Bill Henderson, who had handled ranch business for my father and grandfather before me. Bill listened quietly as I described the confrontation with Karen and the HOA board. "Jake," Bill said when I finished, "I need to be straight with you. These HOA folks have deep pockets and political connections. They can make your life very expensive very quickly, even if they do not have a legal leg to stand on." "So what do you recommend?" Bill sighed. "Document everything. Save every letter, every email, every conversation, and prepare yourself for a fight because something tells me Karen Matthews is not the type to back down easily." He was right about that. The first lawsuit arrived by certified mail exactly 61 days after Karen's ultimatum. The thick envelope contained legal documents claiming that Morrison Ranch violated county zoning ordinances, state environmental regulations, and federal health codes. The list of supposed violations ran for 12 pages. I sat at my kitchen table reading accusations that my sheep operation constituted a public health hazard, and that my farmhouse was a structurally unsafe dwelling that posed a danger to the surrounding community. According to the lawsuit, my ranch was guilty of everything from noise pollution to groundwater contamination. Every single claim was completely false. Bill Henderson reviewed the documents and shook his head in disgust. "Jake, this is harassment, plain and simple. These people are throwing everything at the wall, hoping something will stick." "Can they do this?" "They can file anything they want. The question is whether they can prove it in court." Bill's expression was grim. "But defending against frivolous lawsuits is expensive, even when you win." The legal bills started immediately. Every bogus claim required a response. Every false accusation needed documentation to disprove. My savings account began bleeding money like a wounded animal. Then the county inspectors showed up. I was feeding the sheep on a Tuesday morning when 3 government vehicles pulled into my driveway. Men in official uniforms spread across my property with clipboards and cameras, documenting every inch of my ranch like it was a crime scene. The lead inspector was a weaselly man named Doug Patterson who could not make eye contact when he spoke. He handed me an official notice stating that the county had received numerous complaints about potential health and safety violations at Morrison Ranch. "What kind of complaints?" I asked. Patterson shuffled his paperwork nervously. "Allegations of improper waste disposal, contaminated water sources, and unsafe building conditions." I had been ranching this land for 38 years without a single legitimate complaint. Now suddenly I was public enemy number 1. The inspection lasted 6 hours. They tested my water, measured my fencing, photographed my buildings, and counted my livestock. Patterson wrote furiously on his clipboard while his assistants took hundreds of pictures. 2 weeks later, I received the inspection report. It claimed to have found 17 major violations that required immediate correction, or the county would condemn the property. Bill Henderson exploded when he read the report. "Jake, this is complete fiction. They are claiming your water supply is contaminated, but your water comes from the same mountain spring that feeds half the valley. They are saying your farmhouse is structurally unsound, but it has survived 100 Montana winters." "So what do we do?" "We fight it, but Jake, I need to warn you. This is going to get expensive fast." The harassment campaign escalated daily. HOA members filed noise complaints every time my sheep bleated at dawn. They called the county about suspicious odors from normal ranch operations. They photographed my pickup truck and claimed it was an eyesore that violated community standards. Corinne Matthews orchestrated every attack with military precision. She organized petition drives, contacted local newspapers, and flooded county offices with demands for action against the dangerous ranch operation that threatened their children's safety. The most sickening part was watching county officials cave to the pressure. Doug Patterson, who had grown up in ranch country and knew better, suddenly started enforcing regulations that had never existed. The county health department, which had never bothered my family in 4 generations, now treated my ranch like a toxic waste site. Bill Henderson discovered the truth through his own investigation. "Jake, they are buying these people off. Corinne's husband owns Matthews Development Corporation, and they have been donating heavily to county commissioner campaigns. They want your land for their next subdivision project." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. This was never about community standards or property values. This was about greed. Corinne Matthews wanted to destroy my ranch so her husband could build luxury houses on my family's land. But knowing the truth and proving it in court are different things. The legal fees were crushing me. I had already spent $40,000 defending my right to live on land my family had owned for over a century. Corinne's resources seemed unlimited. Every time we defeated one lawsuit, she filed another. Every time we disproved one false claim, 3 new ones appeared. She was drowning me in legal quicksand, and we both knew it. I sat at my kitchen table one evening, surrounded by legal documents and unpaid bills, watching the sun set over pastures my great-great-grandfather had claimed with nothing but determination and a dream. Corinne Matthews was winning, but the war was not over yet. The demolition order arrived on a cold February morning that would haunt my nightmares forever. The official county document declared that the Morrison farmhouse posed an imminent danger to public safety and must be demolished within 72 hours. I read the order 3 times before the words sank in. 4 generations of my family history, condemned by corrupt officials who had never set foot inside our home until Corinne Matthews started writing campaign checks. Bill Henderson raced to court for an emergency injunction, but the judge ruled that public safety concerns overrode any historical considerations. The demolition would proceed as scheduled. I called my sister in Denver, my cousin in Billings, and every family member I could reach. "They are tearing down the farmhouse," I told them through tears I was not ashamed to shed. "Come get anything you want to save." For 2 days, my family descended on the ranch like refugees fleeing a war zone. We packed photo albums, furniture, and keepsakes that had survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and countless Montana blizzards. Everything that could not be moved got photographed, documented, and mourned. My nephew carried out our great-grandmother's china cabinet. My sister wrapped the mantel clock that had been a wedding gift in 1923. I personally loaded the kitchen table where 4 generations of Morrison men had signed the papers that kept this ranch running. But we could not save the hand-carved oak beams. We could not pack the stone foundation. We could not move the memories embedded in every board and nail. On demolition day, I stood behind yellow caution tape watching a convoy of county vehicles, construction equipment, and official observers gather around my family home. The sheriff's deputies were there to make sure I did not interfere. The county commissioners were there to make sure their dirty work got done. The inspectors were there to document the destruction they had orchestrated. And Corinne Matthews was there to celebrate. She arrived in her white Mercedes at exactly 9 o'clock, wearing a black outfit that looked like she was attending a funeral, which, in a way, she was. She carried a champagne bottle and plastic cups, setting up her victory celebration on the tailgate of her SUV like this was a sporting event. The demolition crew started with the back porch where my grandfather had taught me to whittle wood and tell stories. The machines tore through the screens and supports with mechanical indifference, reducing craftsmanship to scrap metal in minutes. Corinne pulled out her phone and began filming, narrating the destruction like a nature documentary. "And there goes another piece of the old neighborhood," she said into her camera with that fake smile. "Progress is not always pretty, but it is necessary." My hands shook with rage as I watched her document my family's devastation for her social media followers. The wrecking ball arrived at 10:30. It swung through the living room window where my parents had opened Christmas presents for 30 years. Glass exploded outward like frozen tears catching the morning sunlight. Each impact sent tremors through the ground and through my soul. The sound of splintering timber mixed with the confused bleating of my sheep, who sensed something terrible was happening but could not understand what. The kitchen collapsed next. The room where my great-grandmother had cooked Sunday dinners for 60 years disappeared in a cloud of dust and debris. The pantry where my mother had canned vegetables from our garden vanished like it had never existed. Corinne Matthews popped her champagne cork when the main support beam gave way. The sound echoed across the valley like a gunshot, and she raised her plastic cup in a toast to the destruction. "To progress," she announced loudly enough for me to hear, "to community standards, to property values." I wanted to charge through that caution tape and wrap my hands around her throat. I wanted to scream until my lungs burst. I wanted to fight every deputy, every commissioner, and every corrupt official who had made this possible. But I did nothing. I stood there like a broken man and watched my heritage become rubble. By 4 o'clock, nothing remained but a pile of broken wood, twisted metal, and pulverized dreams. A century of family history had been reduced to debris that would be hauled to the county dump like garbage. The sheep scattered in panic as the demolition crew moved to tear down the barn and outbuildings. My livestock, confused and frightened, huddled together in the far pasture while their shelter disappeared. Corinne Matthews finished her champagne and drove away without a backward glance, leaving me standing in the ruins of everything I had ever loved. That night, I slept in my pickup truck, parked where my front porch used to be. The February wind howled through the empty space where my family home had stood for 100 years, and I wept like a child until there were no tears left. I was homeless, bankrupt, defeated. Or so I thought. 3 weeks after the demolition, I was living in a borrowed travel trailer parked behind what used to be my house, sorting through boxes of family documents that we had rescued from the destruction. My sister had brought everything to a storage unit in town. but I needed to go through the papers to settle insurance claims and figure out what came next. Most of the documents were routine ranch business. Cattle sale receipts, equipment warranties, tax records going back decades. But at the bottom of an old wooden crate that had belonged to my great-grandfather, I found a leather portfolio tied with string that had turned brittle with age. Inside were the original land claims and water rights deeds from when my great-great-grandfather first settled this valley in 1893. The papers were yellow and fragile, written in the careful script of a territorial clerk who had recorded the transaction by hand. I had seen these documents before, but only briefly during family meetings about inheritance and taxes. Now, with nothing but time and rage to fuel me, I read every word with the attention of a detective studying evidence. The water rights deed stopped me cold. According to the document, signed by the territorial governor in 1893, Morrison Ranch held exclusive rights to all water flowing from Eagle Springs, the natural mountain spring that fed our irrigation system. The deed specifically granted perpetual and exclusive access to all water originating from the aforementioned spring, including any and all downstream flow, for agricultural, domestic, and livestock purposes. I read the deed 3 more times to make sure I understood what I was seeing. Then I grabbed my truck keys and drove straight to Bill Henderson's office. Bill put on his reading glasses and examined the water rights deed with the reverence of an archaeologist handling ancient treasure. "Jake, do you understand what this means?" "I think so, but I want to hear you say it." Bill spread a county map across his desk and traced the path of Eagle Springs with his finger. "Your great-great-grandfather secured water rights to the entire spring system. Look at the flow pattern." The mountain spring originated high in the peaks above my ranch, flowed down through my property, and continued east toward the valley floor. The water formed a creek that meandered through the grassland before disappearing into the county irrigation system. "Now look at this," Bill said, overlaying a newer map showing current property boundaries. Willowbrook Estates was built directly over the natural creek bed. They had to divert the water flow underground to accommodate their development. My heart started pounding as I followed his finger across the map. "And here," Bill continued, "is the location of Karen Matthews' personal property. Her ranch sat directly downstream from mine, in the valley where Eagle Springs Creek used to flow naturally before the subdivision interrupted its path." "Bill, are you telling me that Karen's ranch depends on my water?" "I am telling you that according to this deed, you own the water rights to every drop that flows from Eagle Springs. Every house in Willowbrook Estates, every lawn sprinkler, every swimming pool, and every livestock operation downstream has been using your water without legal permission for the past 5 years." The room seemed to spin around me as the full implications sank in. Karen Matthews had destroyed my family ranch, while her own operation depended entirely on water that legally belonged to me. "Can I shut it off?" Bill grinned like a predator who had just spotted wounded prey. "Jake, you do not just have the right to shut off that water. You have the legal obligation to protect your water rights from unauthorized use." I spent the next week researching Karen's operation. It turned out that her hobby ranch was actually a serious business. She owned 1,500 sheep on 200 acres of pasture land, marketing her operation as Matthews Premium Lamb to high-end restaurants in Denver and Salt Lake City. Her entire business model depended on the mountain spring water that flowed from my property to hers. Without that water, Her sheep would die, and her ranch would become worthless desert. The irony was so perfect it felt like divine intervention. Corinne Matthews had used corruption, lies, and legal warfare to destroy my ranch because she thought my sheep operation was an eyesore. Now I discovered that her own sheep operation was completely dependent on water that belonged to me. For the first time since the demolition, I smiled. I called Bill Henderson and told him to prepare the legal paperwork. We were going to serve water shutoff notices to every property that had been stealing from Eagle Springs for the past 5 years. Starting with Corinne Matthews. Bill warned me that this would create chaos. Jake, when you shut off that water, you are going to affect every house in Willowbrook Estates. Their property values will collapse overnight. Good, I replied. Let them see how it feels to watch their investments turn to dust. And Corinne's sheep ranch will be destroyed. Even better, she wanted to eliminate my livestock operation because it was unsightly. Now she can watch her own sheep die of thirst. Bill shrugged. It is your legal right. Your great-great-grandfather paid for those water rights fair and square. If people have been using your water without permission, you have every right to shut them off. I thought about my demolished farmhouse, my scattered sheep, and my destroyed family legacy. Corinne Matthews had shown no mercy when she held all the power. Now it was my turn. The water shutoff notices were delivered by certified mail on a Tuesday morning in late March. Each legal document was signed, sealed, and absolutely bulletproof. Bill Henderson had crafted them with the precision of a master swordsmith, forging a blade designed to cut through corruption. The notices gave every affected property owner exactly 48 hours to cease all unauthorized use of water originating from Eagle Springs. After that deadline, I would exercise my legal right to physically shut off access to my water at the source. I had purchased heavy-duty steel gates and industrial locks designed for petroleum pipelines. No bolt cutters or hacksaws would be breaking through my barriers once I secured the spring head and the main distribution points. The first phone call came at 7:30 that morning. Jake, this is Corinne Matthews. Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. We need to talk immediately about these ridiculous water notices. Good morning, Corinne. What seems to be the problem? You know exactly what the problem is. You cannot just shut off water to an entire subdivision. There are laws about essential services. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. You are absolutely right about laws, Corinne. Water rights laws, which clearly state that I own all water flowing from Eagle Springs, and anyone using my water without permission is committing theft. That is absurd. This water has been flowing through the valley for thousands of years. And my family has owned the legal rights to it since 1893. Would you like me to read you the territorial deed? The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Jake, we can work something out. The HOA is prepared to offer you a substantial compensation package for a long-term water usage agreement. The same HOA that demolished my house. That was a county decision based on safety concerns. Safety concerns that you fabricated through bribery and corruption. Corinne's voice turned sharp. I am trying to be reasonable here, Jake. But if you shut off water to Willowbrook Estates, you will be facing lawsuits from every homeowner in the subdivision. We have resources you cannot imagine. I am sure you do, but I have something you do not have. What is that? Legal ownership of the water you have been stealing for 5 years. I hung up on her. The next call came from her attorney, who tried to sound intimidating but could not hide the desperation in his voice. The call after that came from a county commissioner who had suddenly discovered his interest in finding a reasonable compromise now that Karen's campaign contributions were threatened. None of it mattered. My water rights were older than the county government and more solid than the mountains they flowed from. On Thursday morning at exactly 8:00 a.m., I drove to the Eagle Springs source with my steel gates, locks, and a heart full of righteous satisfaction. Bill Henderson met me there with a county sheriff's deputy who was required to witness the legal shutoff. The springhead was a natural basin carved into granite by centuries of mountain runoff. My great-great-grandfather had built a simple wooden dam to control the flow, and subsequent generations had upgraded it with concrete and steel pipes that directed water to various distribution points. I installed the first steel gate across the main outlet pipe. The sound of metal clicking into place was the sweetest music I had ever heard. "That is for my demolished house," I said out loud. The second gate went across the irrigation channel that fed the subdivision. "That is for my scattered sheep." The third gate blocked the creek bed that supplied Karen's ranch. "And that is for 4 generations of family history that you destroyed." Each lock was a masterpiece of German engineering that would require industrial cutting equipment to break. The sheriff's deputy documented everything with photographs and official timestamps. By 8:30 a.m., every drop of Eagle Springs water was under my complete control. The phone started ringing before I got back to my trailer. Karen Matthews called first, screaming about her sheep dying of thirst. Then came the HOA board members, the subdivision residents, the county officials, and finally Karen's husband from Matthews Development Corporation. They offered money. They offered legal settlements. They offered public apologies and promises to rebuild my house exactly as it had been. But some things cannot be undone with money or promises. Some actions have consequences that cannot be negotiated away. I watched from my trailer window as Karen's white Mercedes raced back and forth between her house and her ranch, probably trying to organize emergency water deliveries for her 1,500 sheep. The same sheep she had tried to force me to remove from my land. By evening, news trucks appeared at the entrance to Willowbrook Estates. The story of the water shutoff had reached regional media, and reporters were interviewing frantic homeowners about their property values collapsing overnight. Karen Matthews stood in front of the cameras wearing dark sunglasses, her perfect composure finally cracking under pressure. She blamed me for being vindictive and unreasonable, but the reporters had done their homework. They knew about the demolished farmhouse and the corruption investigation that was about to destroy her carefully constructed empire. That night, I slept better than I had since the demolition. The sound of Eagle Springs flowing freely through my locked gates sang me to sleep like a lullaby of justice. Karen Matthews would learn what it felt like to lose everything she had built through greed and corruption. Just like she had taught me. 3 days after the water shut off, Karen Matthews appeared at my trailer door at dawn, looking like she had not slept in a week. Her perfectly styled hair was disheveled, her designer clothes were wrinkled, and her hands shook as she knocked on my door. "Jake, please, we need to talk." I opened the door but did not invite her inside. She stood on my makeshift porch steps like a beggar asking for scraps, which was exactly what she had become. "My sheep are dying," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. I have 1,500 animals that need water, and the emergency deliveries are costing me $10,000 a day. I cannot sustain this. I know exactly how that feels. I am prepared to offer you $500,000 for permanent water rights to my ranch. I almost laughed. 500,000? Karen, your husband was planning to build a subdivision on my land that would have been worth $20 million. 1 million then, cash today. Not interested. She grabbed my arm with desperate fingers. Jake, I am begging you, name your price, anything. I will give you anything you want. I looked into her eyes and saw the same desperation and helplessness that I had felt watching my farmhouse collapse under the wrecking ball. But unlike her, I had lost everything through no fault of my own. What I want, Karen, is for you to understand what it feels like to watch your life's work destroyed by someone who has the power to help, but chooses not to. This is different. You are talking about innocent animals. And I was talking about 4 generations of family history. You did not care then. Karen's legs gave out and she sat down hard on my steps, sobbing into her hands. Please, Jake, I am sorry. I am so sorry for what we did to your house. I was wrong. I admit it. I will do anything to make this right. But some apologies come too late. Some actions cannot be undone with words. The corruption investigation that Bill Henderson had triggered reached its conclusion 2 weeks later. Doug Patterson, the county inspector who had fabricated violations against my ranch, was arrested for bribery and conspiracy. 2 county commissioners resigned in disgrace. Karen's husband's development company faced federal charges for fraud and illegal campaign contributions. The HOA dissolved when homeowners realized their property values had collapsed beyond recovery. Nobody wanted to buy a luxury house with no guaranteed water supply. The beautiful lawns of Willowbrook Estates turned brown and died, leaving the subdivision looking like a ghost town in the desert. Karen's sheep ranch failed completely. She was forced to sell her livestock at emergency auction prices and declare bankruptcy within 30 days of the water shutoff. The woman who had once held champagne toasts to celebrate my family's destruction now faced foreclosure on everything she owned. Meanwhile, I used the insurance settlement from my demolished house and the legal damages we won from the corruption lawsuit to rebuild Morrison Ranch bigger and better than ever. The new farmhouse rose from the exact foundation of the old one, honoring my family's heritage while embracing modern construction techniques. I restocked my sheep herd with prize-winning animals purchased from Karen's bankruptcy auction. The irony was not lost on me that her sheep were now grazing peacefully on the land she had tried to steal. The mountain spring flows freely once again, feeding green pastures and healthy livestock just as it has for over a century. My water rights remain secure, protected by territorial law and righteous victory. Every morning at sunrise, I walk out of my new farmhouse and listen to the gentle bleating of my sheep across 800 acres of Montana grassland. The mountain air is still clean and sweet. The grass still grows thick and green. And in the distance, I can see the empty buildings of Karen's failed ranch, a permanent reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, is never denied. My name is Jake Morrison, and I am a 3rd-generation sheep rancher who learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting corrupt people face the consequences of their own actions. The water flows, the sheep graze, and the Morrison Ranch endures.